Hello and welcome to Bollyoz.com. Today we have a multi-talented personality with us who is not only an academic, a social worker, but also a politician. He has been making a mark in the Indian community as well as the Australian community with his some interesting work, both socially and professionally. We are here with Jasvinder Sidhu, and of course, most of you would be knowing him very well. Jasvinder, welcome to Bollyoz.com.
Thank you, Vikrant.
It is really good to hear about the kind of works that you have been doing. But first and foremost, you are an academic. So tell us your journey to Australia and how you ended up becoming an academic.
Vikrant, I came to Australia similar to many other migrants in 2005. Early 2005 in February, I came here as an international student, and I had options to go to many universities, but I selected RMIT because RMIT was in the middle of the city, and it was very convenient. So I came here to study Master of Professional Accounting and Master of Commerce. It was a double degree, which I started in 2005 and finished at the end of 2006.
So that's interesting. So you came here to do accounting. So did you end up doing accounting, or did it take you somewhere else?
Well, in India, I had one master's, so technically I hold triple masters. But my bachelor was in accounting, and I did my master's in computer applications. So in India, I was a lecturer for 1 year. So actually, I continued my first profession. So at the end of 2006, when I finished my degree at RMIT, I was on a bridging visa. And whatever jobs I applied, and I couldn't get any because of the PR status. Then Dr. Mahesh Joshi, who was my teacher in India at one of the colleges, and he knew me very well. In India, I was a record holder at universities and was one of the toppers. So he knew me from that angle as well. So he suggested that I should concentrate on my first profession, which was academics. So he helped me to prepare my CV, and he submitted it to his supervisor, and luckily I ended up getting a job as a tutor.
Okay, so that's fantastic, and that I think many of us has taken that journey. Probably I have taken that journey the same way,
yes,
like you. So it has been interesting because I see that the kind of growth you have had in last probably a decade or so, it has been phenomenal. And not only you have been an academic, you have been doing lots of work for social work. You have been making a mark felt, and you have this interesting organization called Let's Feed.
Yes.
So tell us about your social work and of course, a bit background. How did you start with it?
Well, my research interests were always in social behavior, social discrimination, bias. So I did my honors here at Ballarat University with two world renowned researchers in that field. And so the research was studying Indian caste system. So Indian caste system, as you would know, is based on inherent social boundaries, where boundaries are set based on your birth. So I studied that. That gave me exposure to a number of other social theories. So I studied Karl Marx, I studied Max Weber, and various other social movements in US. So that gave me a lot of perspectives to understand the problems that migrants face. So I ended up helping international students. I had a lot of students at early universities where I taught. I was teaching at CQU, Central Queensland University, and then University of Ballarat. They both had predominantly very large Indian and subcontinent communities, students from those communities. So I ended up helping students, and including family violence victims. And somehow I started helping students, and it became social work.
Okay, that's quite interesting and fascinating. And one thing again I see a commonality between us is our study and focus on caste issue in India. And I have been working quite a lot on that. And probably I'll digress a bit and ask you a question on that issue on caste.
Yes.
Because here one issue has been, and in the last few years, people really talk about the kind of racism that they have faced and the problems they come being discriminated on or upon. But one thing they don't forego is their own caste values or the caste system.
Yes.
So here they want to fight against racism, but they don't want to shed away their own casteism.
Yes.
And this is a big problem I see. What is your view on that?
Yes. I studied caste system from the beginning, from Manu Smriti to the modern vehicle, the way caste is used. So what I did in my honors was I looked at the Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants, which is called ICAI, where I looked at how much the low castes are represented in an organized profession. Usually the theories show that the social structure is usually reflected in any modern organized profession. So I wanted to see that. So I looked at the low castes, where the so-called low castes, although we don't believe in caste systems, so all castes are equal. But the so-called low castes, which are listed in the Indian Constitution by the British when they started doing the census since 1871. So those castes are called scheduled castes because they're listed in the Constitution or the schedule.
And of course, the ones which were the most discriminated
Yes.
and often called as untouchables. And
Yes.
it was only in, I would rather give credit to the Britishers to at least
Yes, acknowledge them.
Acknowledge them,
Yes.
yes.
British were the first who identified the most disadvantaged, and they listed those castes, and those castes since then are called scheduled castes. So I looked at the population of those castes because in early census times, since 1871 to 1941, every Indian had to tell which caste they belonged to. So British could easily identify how many of the Indians are low castes. So the data was that, and then more than 50% of the castes were the so-called low castes, which are in the Hindu system called Shudras. So I looked at that, and I was quite fascinated that we oppose the reservation system. But despite the reservation system, whether the low castes had any representation in an organized profession,
Yep.
and we found that despite of the fact that the so-called low castes are more than 55% of the population, in 1950s, I looked at a historical study, their representation in an organized profession was less than 2%.
Yep, and that is one of the most unfortunate thing that India has.
Yes.
And again, we try to be politically correct about saying low caste, but then people are practicing that.
Yes.
On face they might be politically correct, but
Yes.
then that's what I've been witnessing here in Australia, that people come here for a multicultural society. They
Yes.
enjoy the benefits that Australia as a country gives
Yes.
them. But then somehow this negative thing of caste, class, region, religion, sex, all those things, they are not getting themselves freed of.
Yes.
And probably I see, a person like you who's so well-read, who has done research on something like this, probably to spread awareness. And I'm really glad to, know another facet of yours in this aspect. So, yeah, you can continue. Sorry.
No, so with the caste system, we did that research, and then I'm working on a larger project which will cover 70 years of in post-independence. So we're going to look at whether any affirmative actions had any impact on the conditions of low caste. We're going to look at from the angle of accounting profession. So I'm working with the professor from university in Toronto, York University, and this lady specializes in social bias, racism and gender bias, and now we're going to look at social boundaries drawn around caste system.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So that gives another aspect for of yours. But you are also involved in a particular project called Let's Feed.
Yes.
And that is something that it is not just focused on Indian community, but it is at a much more wider community level, which is involving various other NGOs and players to help homeless people.
Yes.
Tell us more about Let's
Yes.
Feed.
So the reality behind Let's Feed is that it originated from my study in social bias. Whenever a migrant community goes to another country in large numbers, then there will be some reservations from the existing communities, because when you go to a new country in large numbers, so the Indians have come here in 400,000 in last 10 years. Earlier the Indian number was quite small, so it will change the social fabric. When the social fabric changes, the economic fabric changes, people see new faces now taking control over jobs and making businesses and in expensive homes. So there will be reservation. So I studied all that, and I studied the social movements and how societies have progressed in the other parts of the world, especially in Europe and in North America. And then I looked at what projects we can create which will basically show the good side of our communities. So I looked at what strong cultural values do we have. So the Indian culture, whether it is the Sikhism or the Hinduism, we really like to care about others. We do care, whether to some extent we like to do it because of our religion, but eventually it has a very strong social value and social benefit. So I looked at Guru Nanak's principle of his one statement is very powerful, which is Sarbat da Pala, which means always wish well for everyone. So I was on the committee of a Sikh temple, a Sikh Gurudwara, a Tarnet Gurudwara, and then I saw there that lots and lots of food was wasted. And then I started exploring. So I won't go into details because it is many years of work. So I'll just summarize it. So eventually we ended up finding that there were takers of our food, and those takers were of uncooked food and cooked food. So we started working with those organizations which are working with family violence victims or homeless youth or homeless people in general. So that's how the Let's Feed's idea was born.
That's quite interesting. And so can you tell me like now what is the shape that your project has taken?
So Let's Feed, in simple terms, it's basically originated from Gurudwara's langar. So langar was extended to the wider Australian community via what we could offer. So although it started with the Gurudwara, but then the Hindu community, the Hindu temples also joined. So I'll explain what different projects do we have. I saw there is an Indian culture, very strong Sikh culture and the Hindu culture, and I looked at what we can offer, and then I did my research and found what social problems exist there and how we can match what we can offer and what is the need there. And then I applied my accounting knowledge. So in accounting, I have been teaching cost analysis and pricing. So in that we look at efficiency, how to reduce waste of resources, waste of procedures, and how we can improve the process. So I set up some procedures, and those procedures, the aim of those procedures was how we can utilize available food without getting it wasted and without going it expired. So the foundations of the Let's Feed was through breakfast clubs. So breakfast clubs were started a few years ago when we extended breakfast to a local school in Werribee, and we looked at what needs they had. First of all, I explained why breakfast clubs are needed in Australia. So we think as migrants that Australia, a country like Australia, would not have many social problems to the extent that people miss food. We identified through research, working with counsellors and just exploring the social issues, that in Australia, a very large number of young children go to school without food. And the reason for that is drug abuse and drug use, family violence, and mental sickness, single families, and many other social issues. So the impact of all that is on young children. Mostly the children who suffer are primary school children. So data shows, because I was sent a letter by Deputy Premier of Victoria, and the letter said 1 out of 7 school children are going to school in Victoria without food. Now, all of them are not neglected, those children. They could be victim of situation. But a very large portion of them miss food because of that reason. That basically poses a very big social problem. So in a country such as Australia, in a city such as Melbourne, which is the most livable city, has been rated for so many years. And we see that thousands and thousands of school children are going to school without food. So I saw an opportunity there. This is the time we can extend Guru Nanak's langar to these people. Because Guru Nanak said the langar is for the needy. Langar is not for people like me who are already full from their homes. So we started with one school, and eventually we ended up supporting 20 schools, and then we had 1,200 school children. And then somehow the leader of the opposition, Daniel Andrews, he heard about my project, and I was his advisor as well. And he said he would like to go and visit one of the schools. So Daniel Andrews visited Silverton Primary School in Noble Park with me. He spent 45 minutes there in October 2014, and he created a policy that if he wins, he will basically fund 500 schools and 25,000 school children. So he won, and now we have Daniel Andrews as Premier of Victoria. And so through his government's policy, 25,000 school children are funded breakfast meals.
Okay, that's quite an incredible work that you are doing. And it's really good to know that a person of Indian origin and who has just made his mark in Australia only 10 years or 11 years back and has been able to achieve so much. So that's quite fantastic. But then there's another aspect to you, and that is you as a politician.
Yes.
You are quite well known in the Indian community and the local community in Tarn and Windham. So tell us a bit about your political work and your ambitions.
So before I go into the political work, I'll just summarize Let's Feed's what other projects are there very, very briefly. So within Let's Feed, the second project is we raise uncooked food and we apply again the accounting logistics techniques, and we have set up more than 20 collection points throughout Victoria, including various Sikh gurdwaras and Hindu temples, and we raise minimum 1 ton food per month, and it is supplied to St. Mary's House of Welcome, and they serve breakfast and lunch to more than 100 homeless people every day. We supply food to Fair Share, and we send food to Asylum Seeker Source Center as well as White Line, who look after homeless youth. And the third project is we're working specifically with White Line. Let's Feed is working with White Line to raise funds to support homeless youth who are below the age of 25, and sometimes the homeless youth are as young as 12 years old.
Okay.
So with all that political social work and working and raising the issues of international students, family violence victims, and my background in research in social bias and social boundaries, somehow I got connected with politicians, because in order to solve any social problem, you need to deal with politicians. So I met number of politicians from all political parties, but somehow I found the Labour politicians and my cultural value, my core social values had a lot common with the Labour Party. So I started working with a number of MPs, and I worked for many years as a volunteer. And I got to know almost all office bearers and all the members of parliament, whether we were in opposition or in the government.
So that's quite interesting to know. But can you tell us more about how you have moved in the political circles, or what are you doing now? Are you wanting to become a councillor, or are you looking for a much better opening in politics, like going into the state elections, or maybe the the federal government? What are your future plans?
Well, my ambition is to make a difference. Whether that difference is made through social projects, or whether it is through academics, or through political advisory roles, or any role which may come up in future. So I do not have a fixed ambition. I never had a fixed ambition. So I prefer to work as much as possible, and then any position is a byproduct. So at present, I am advisor to Joan Ryan, Federal Member of Parliament for Lola, which is a division in and around Werribee. It is the former seat of it's a seat of former Prime Minister Julia Gillard. So I work in that area. That area also covers Tarneit, which is and Windham, which has the highest growth of Indian community in Australia. So I identify issues that a community has there, and I advise Joan Ryan, who is federal member, how to sort those issues. Issues around immigration, issues around local issues, social bias. Sometimes the Sikh children have issues at school, so we identify those issues. Sometimes Sikh children were denied admission in some of the private schools because the rules say boys can't have long hair. So all that work, I'm involved a lot in that area. But previously, I worked for many months as advisor to the Leader of the Opposition and Premier of Victoria, and I worked on trade policy with India, and I worked on multicultural policy as well.
Okay, so what do you think? There has been lots of talks about this growing relationship of India and Australia, but when you look at the statistics, that relationship is moving at a very snail's pace. So what can we do as community members or people like you who are in politics now to get that fast track, to get, there are issues like simple issues of, student visa issues, or students not getting any kind of help or support the way they should, or vis-a-vis comparatively with students from China. And Indian students, I feel, are very disadvantaged. So what are we doing as community representatives?
The Indian community has migrated to Australia in large numbers in a very short time. So that is the main issue here. When a community migrates in a large number, obviously they can firstly the individuals would look at their personal growth and economic settlement. At the social level, organizing yourself and identifying your social issues, political lobbying, that takes time. So that's where we are missing. We do not have any political lobbying power because we are not organized. Although there are a number of organizations, but they're not politically organized. And we are not able to, as a community, identify our social issues. Sometimes we are able to identify, but we are not able to find solutions. And we are not able to find ways how to lobby with politicians, whether it's Labour, Liberal, or any other political party. So that's where we are missing. At present, we have nearly a complete absence of any political lobbying. Now, you also asked me a question whether and how, where the relationship between India and Australia is. Because the diaspora and community in general do not have political presence, therefore, Australian policymakers, whether they are politicians or they are other policymakers, they have complete absence of cultural values, how to deal with companies in India, how to initiate talks, how to work with Indian politicians. There are a number of social and cultural barriers that exist between Australian policymakers and Indian policymakers, Australian politicians and Indian politicians. Age is one factor. Australian politicians are very young, into their late 30s and 40s. The Indian politicians, as you know, are much older. The way the Indian bureaucrats work and the way the Australian bureaucrats work are totally different. I'll give you one example. The Maharashtra Chief Minister invited me, somebody organized me to meet him when I was advisor to Daniel Andrews. Well, I was invited to meet at 8 p.m., but Maharashtra's Chief Minister, he met me at 12 a.m. So I had to wait for 4 hours. So things like these, whether Australian policymakers are able to work at the pace and at the style that Indian politicians work. That is one. As you asked me, there is not much progress between the relationship between India and Australia. The data shows on trade or international students, we are really, really slow. The reason for that, as I said before, there's a complete absence of knowledge of Indian culture. Australia, on the side of Australia as well as on Indian side. Trade, Australians, I think companies and the policymakers, they don't know how to deal with India. They don't know how to deal with Indian politicians. And there are things where I think there's a complete absence. The other thing is there are not even a single Indian political advisor in any political party at any level. Once you do not have policy advisors from that culture, you have a complete absence.
Yeah, and that's what you see. That the kind of dealing with India is just limited to the soft cultural powers, and it is just cricket and Bollywood.
And food.
Cricket and Bollywood, and it doesn't move beyond that. And Bollywood also does not attract any kind of investment or anything back and forth. And which is again another big concern, that even lots of them now, there is a growing, local Indian film industry which is bubbling to come out, but they don't know what to do and how to go about it. And probably, as what you're saying, is getting those kind of advisors there in governance would be very important.
Yes. I believe that the Indian community will have to come out of their comfort zone. Individual level, number of us have grown and we have achieved high success, but at organization level, at group level, and organizing ourselves, we still have a lot more to go, a lot more to achieve. Look at the UK and US. We always talk about Canada, the number of politicians who succeeded there, but we basically do not know how they did that. So as you said, we would need more people who become more active in political sphere, so that we can fill that vacuum that the political and the policy framework has, how to deal with India. Cricket, food, and Bollywood can assist, but that is not the main focus. The main focus is on trade, expanding relationship, cultural ties, research ties, and there are many other fields where there's a lot of possibilities.
And I think it's very important that a person like you, who has that understanding of both insider from both the cultures, should be heard and should be supported by the community. So I always am a bit apprehensive the way Indian community, and which you have also pointed out, comes out to support anyone who's wanting to be that bridge out there. So what could be done to create an awareness about among the Indian community members to understand the need of having those kind of representative in right places?
Well, at the political level, as you said, we do not have, it's a complete vacuum. There's not even a single person who is in that position in any political party where they can influence policy. Well, I believe the community, I would appeal to the community, if they identify anyone, well, I would not just present my case, I would just say, if they identify anyone who has capacity and who they think can identify issues, or who they think that has identified issues and working on those issues, I think the community should support. Community should support, because until and unless we mobilize ourselves as a community in every aspect and in every section and fraction of any social society, such as Australian society, I think we are missing a lot. We are not able to identify real social issues, and obviously once we are not able to identify them, obviously we cannot find the solutions.
So Jasvinder, to sum it up, what do you think should be the way for us as Indian community to grow and to support each other politically as well as socially?
In my view, in any society, the social issues, identification of social issues and finding solutions can only be done through political power. And that is also true for us in Australia. So far, there is a complete absence of Indian community in politics. So my appeal to all the members in the community would be that we start taking interest in Australian politics. So far, we continue to take interest, for Punjabis continue to take interest in what Prakash Singh Badal is doing, what Congress is doing and BJP is doing. It is okay to have interest, and we should all have, but start taking interest in local issues. What Medicare is, what will happen if Medicare tax is there? What will happen if there's education cut? So let's start taking interest and identify what you can do. And people who have aspirations, they should come up, start working with political parties, any political party that you want to support, and volunteer yourself, and then political parties will identify you, and probably they would appoint you as advisors, and then that would be the beginning of a long journey.
Thank you, Jasvinder, for coming to Bollyoz.com and sharing your really insightful views about politics, social work that you have been doing, and the way you have been trying to connect the Indian community in the mainstream politics. We wish you all the best for your future endeavors and the work that you do. We'll be always supportive for your work and the way you are supporting the Indian community to connect with a wider Australian audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vikrant. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for giving me time.
Thanks.